Hi, and welcome back to the show. Today, I am joined by Arnold Cobbaert. He is the founder and CEO of Conectys. They are a 22-year-old outsourcing veteran. They started from humble origins. Arnold was the founder, humble origins in Romania. He chose Romania as the original base for the country. Now they spread across 15 countries globally and have about a 10,000 seat capacity. So it's incredible what you can achieve in 22 years of persistence. It's a fantastic conversation with Arnold. We, of course, cover the Conectys journey and bring it to today's topic du jour of AI and automation and what the future holds for Arnold, Conectys, and the industry generally. As always, if you want any of the show notes, go to outsourceaccelerator.com/podcast. Enjoy. Arnold, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Derek. I'm great. It's a sunny day here in Bucharest, Romania. How are you?
Very good. Yes, it's an overcast but very hot day in Dubai, where I'm sitting, and Romania is maybe a good place to start. Before we get there, though, Arnold, it's great to have you on the show. And why don't you first start, give the audience a little bit of context over what is Conectys?
Yeah, so Conectys is a global outsourcing firm. We stopped calling ourselves a BPO. We started calling ourselves a business transformation outsourcing firm. We focus on CX, multilingual CX outsourcing, multilingual content moderation, labeling and annotation, and then AI advisory services. We also have a second company that is part of the group, which is called Kaboo, KBOO, and that is a gig worker platform. We might go into that a little bit later also. And we're present in pretty much distributed, spread over all the continents globally. So we have around 15 offices right now globally and growing.
Amazing. And how long have you been going? And can you give us a sense of size or capacity? Or
Yeah, so in terms of current overall seat capacity globally, we're hovering around 10,000. And how long have I been at it? So that's maybe an interesting story to start with here. I spent around a decade working for what was back then called EDS, Electronic Data Systems, that was later acquired by HP and renamed to DXC Technologies. So that's kind of where I got into the outsourcing universe. And I always had this question I was asking myself, okay, India and the Philippines, wonderful destinations for English language outsourcing. But what's the solution for clients who are confronted with multilingual needs? Is there an equivalent to India or the Philippines somewhere in Europe or somewhere else in the world? And I started doing a bit of due diligence, and that's how I bumped into Romania. The only thing I knew about Romania was Ceausescu. This was a country with a Latin language, which makes it very easy for Romanian people to learn English, French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. There's availability also of English, obviously, and it's a very soft-spoken English, not with a Slavic accent. And then you have presence of German, you have the neighboring countries, Hungary, you have some Russian, you have Bulgarian, you have Turkish. So it's a very, very interesting location in terms of language capabilities. And I remember doing the due diligence here in Romania, coming over and then discovering that nobody ever heard about the concept of call center or outsourcing or anything like that. So this was all virgin territory, so to speak. So I kind of had a first mover advantage by opening a small office here. I remember doing a lot of planning and strategizing and thinking until one day I said, okay, it's time to do it and stop planning and start doing. And I remember in a weekend, I drafted a website that said, we are the leaders in multilingual outsourcing. And the we was my phone, my computer, and myself. And signed the first small client. I remember it was 2 FTEs, which allowed me to take a little bit of profit and put that in a little bit more marketing, and then a second client and a third client. And before we knew it, a couple of years down the road, we were around 500 people here in Romania.
wow.
Which is when we actually then decided, okay, we need to go from being a local one-side player to a little bit more of a player with a global footprint. That's when I jumped on a plane to the Philippines and set up the subsidiary there. And then from there, basically, we kept growing with the Philippines. And then we had requests for clients like, okay, can you do other countries also? And that's kind of how we gradually rolled into where we are today with the locations that we have, which include now Kuala Lumpur, Taipei, Istanbul, Egypt, Poland, Greece, moving on to the Americas. We are in Colombia and in the US. So that's roughly the current footprint.
What a journey.
Yeah,
Congratulations. And that's
it's
about
been an amazing,
22
yeah,
years, yeah?
it's been an amazing experience. I'm very grateful for having had this opportunity to see something grow from idea to something that is actually having an impact on client success, on employee growth. It's been a fantastic story so far.
And how do you compare and contrast, having now sites across multiple countries, how do you compare and contrast setting up sites in very established outsourcing strongholds such as the Philippines versus being, a pioneer in a virgin territory such as Romania? What are the sort of benefits versus the challenges of doing that?
Yeah. So what we often hear from our clients, existing and prospective, is what they like about Conectys is that we're large and experienced enough to be a safe bet, but that we're still fast and nimble and small enough for us to be fast and flexible. And the other aspect of that is, of course, if you're an AT&T or similar and you want to go outsource, you're talking about 5,000, 10,000 seat operations, for example. That's historically what it used to be. Obviously, we're not going to be the first choice for opportunities like that. But for the opportunities that we target, which is anywhere from 50 to 500 plus, it's an advantage to be the size that we are. Because those clients are going to be, let's say, a little bit more important than they would be with what I like to call the gorillas in the industry, with all due respect for them. But they have 600,000 employees. So if you have a 500 seat opportunity, you're not going to get the white glove treatment. So large enough to be safe, small enough to matter, and to be flexible and nimble and entrepreneurial. That's kind of the feedback that we get a lot from our clients.
Sure. And how do you compare and contrast the established locations such as Philippines and India versus the pioneering ones such as Romania?
Well, I mean, Romania has, of course, since the very beginning, it has evolved a lot, which is good for the country. Inflation of salaries, growth, I should say, growth of salaries, and all that has put it almost on par with some of the other countries in Europe, from where we deliver multilingual services. So the country has evolved a lot over the years. A lot of the larger players entered the domain and also setting up facilities here. So it is now a well-established, recognized location in terms of outsourcing. But it is today, even though we started here, it is just an important pawn on our chessboard. It is not necessarily always the best location for all types of client requirements. So that's kind of how it evolved over time. As for your other example, the Philippines, I mean, the Philippines was already a well-established location, as is India. So we basically were able to enter that market on the back of our combined strength in multilingual at very compelling cost points back then, and also being able to handle the Anglo-Saxon needs, US, UK, Australia, New Zealand. So that's kind of how we were successful in growing there. It's the combination of multilingual plus.
Right. And when you have so many destinations, you've got 15 countries on offer. It's a smorgasbord. How do you delineate? How do you determine where to place staff? Is it typically like a client request based on language, based on time zone, or do you sort of strategically place clients and accounts to different geos according to your preferences? How do you work that?
One word: we listen to the clients. We have clients coming to us and they say, we don't want a headache of having to travel to multiple locations if we want to do update trainings and so on. So we would prefer one location. And then we have other clients who say we want business continuity in case of disaster. So we'd like to have at least two locations. That could be a driver. The other driver can be, for example, if you need couple of hundred Polish speakers and you need a couple of hundred of Arabic speakers, that's clearly is going to be a setup where we are going to leverage Poland and Egypt in this example. It really is bespoke to the specific requirements of the client. We listen, we intake, and then we come forward with some suggested geo setup solutions. And then what we always do is we do everything we can in terms of a governance model and a management model of the account to isolate the client as much as possible from multi-site complexities. That's something that we handle for them, so they have a SPOC. But sometimes, indeed, clients still want to go on site to do a meet and greet with staff, to do specific trainings and so on and so on. And that's where the preferences come in terms of travel overhead. Let's call it like that.
Mm. Got it. Incredible. And you have diversified over the 20 odd years. You have now a couple of different products within the platform. There's a gig platform, there's an EOR, and then you have your main Conectys, I understand. And,
Yeah.
do you want to just sort of talk through
Yeah,
the
of course,
product
of course.
range,
Yes,
starting
of course,
initially
of
with
course.
Conectys?
So, of course, I mean, the traditional outsourcing model is still an extremely important pillar for everything that we do. It's basically Conectys employing a team, managing the team, training a team, and managing against committed SLAs, KPIs, CSAT, NPS, and what have you. That's the traditional outsourcing model. That's what we call the first talent pillar. We have defined 4 talent pillars in our mix. The second talent pillar is some clients come to us and say, hey, I'd really like to get access to the talent available or the cost points in some of the locations where you guys are present, but I'm not yet ready for handing over the keys in terms of letting you guys manage the staff. So that's where we basically have an answer and we say, okay, you can go with an employer of record setup, which basically is we act purely as a employment vehicle for the client, and the client then has a direct responsibility over staff and the management and the tools and the day-to-day operations. We back that up in some cases for clients also with facility as a service because they don't have offices and we have offices. So we can then also combine employer of record with managed facilities for the client where they don't have to worry about utility connections, internet connections, diesel generator for power failure backup and what have you. So that's the second talent pillar, or the second way that we offer basically access to talent for our clients. And then the third one is Kaboo, that's KBOO.ai. That is a gig platform where basically we allow gig workers, just like an Uber driver is a gig worker, we allow gig workers from 180 countries across the globe to register themselves on the Kaboo platform. And then we basically also allow businesses to come on the same platform. They have very specific requirements for skill sets, talents, can be language, can be, rather basic skill sets, can go all the way up to STEMs skill sets, science, technology, engineering, and math. So very advanced profiles. And then basically we act as a connector between the business needs and the gig workers and put them in touch and facilitate the whole transaction element there, contracting the gig worker on behalf of the businesses, tracking performed time, hour deliverables, and handling the invoicing and the payment towards the gig workers. So that's the third talent model. And then the fourth talent in the 4 talent models is what we call AI. We really consider this as another way to deliver work, so we also call it a talent. And obviously, that is something that is going through an extreme hype cycle right now. It's amazing technology. We see a lot of client interest in what can AI mean for me, but at the same time, we also see a lot of clients saying, hey, I don't want to be a guinea pig. I want to be careful with this. Maybe it's too early. I've heard things about hallucinations and all that. So that's where we guide the clients into carefully and in a controlled fashion and in a safe fashion implementing and injecting artificial intelligence into their processes. So those are the 4 talents that we offer to our clients.
You certainly keep yourself busy with Kaboo, which is KABOO.ai. Like how's that going? I look always sort of have followed Upwork and Freelancer with interest, and those platforms have generally really struggled, haven't they? And I think they're still struggling because just the unit economics of trying to make gig work, smaller projects, smaller sort of doses of work is really difficult. How are you finding it? And do you generally find that it's sort of prosumers that are using gig workers for one-off top projects, or do you sort of have an enterprise client base that is using gig workers to do the odd jobs around the other bigger departmental requirements?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think first of all, it's important to understand the difference between a platform like Upwork and freelancer.com. They literally, as the name says for freelancer.com, they work with freelancers. So the characteristic of a freelancer is that they have set up their one-man legal entity. They have a tax ID and they invoice for the work they deliver from that tax ID. A gig worker does not have a tax ID. It is somebody who does this on the side. And there are, depending on the jurisdiction that we're talking about, there are different labor laws and social security laws and what have you. In some countries, they're not allowed to go above a certain amount of hours per month that they can, or per year, that they can generate income like that. The barrier to entry for a gig worker is much lower because they don't need to go and incorporate a legal entity. Even if it's a one-man legal entity, they don't need to have the hassle of like a formal accounting and reporting to government on the back of their tax ID. So it's a different demographic. And what that means is that you have like a much more fluid and broader scale of types of talent. You can imagine that somebody who is a student that wants to do some side work, for example, labeling and annotation to train AI, they're not typically going to have a go through the process of setting up a one-man company. They're a student, they're focused on other things, but they want to have that extra income and they have the skills and capacity to do that. It basically gives you access to a much more broader and also entry-level workforce for that kind of work. And it goes all the way up to maybe, for example, an example I like to use is for medical imaging, a radiologist who wants to contribute to growing the capacity of AI models, is obviously hyper specialized, but this is also kind of a side activity, and I don't want to bother setting up a legal entity. So they are also considered gig workers. It is actually exactly the same thing as an Uber or equivalent, where you can just, if you have a car, you can just register on their platform, go through some checks, and then you can start driving people around. It's exactly the same model, or Uber delivery as an equivalent, maybe for the student example. So where do we plug this in was the second part of your question. Our clients are confronted with either seasonality or they have peak moments. It is a fantastic way to absorb those volume fluctuations in incoming work with a very elastic workforce. Sometimes you're paid per hour, but you're also going to be paid per outcome, per delivered work unit. I've resolved a ticket. I spent 3 minutes on a phone call with a client. I've annotated something. So that's per work unit that you're being paid. That really opens a fantastic new avenue of absorbing those peaks and troughs in volumes. And it's also very interesting for those companies who have a very specific project-based need. So they need like a high peak in capability and a very specific skill set. They can onboard those people. We can automate even the training that's not yet available today, but with AI, that will also come to have automatic or AI-driven training and testing. And then you have this flexible workforce, and you can basically just, anybody who has like 3 hours of time during the day can just log in and start working and start delivering value to our clients. So that's kind of the positioning of this workforce. It really complements very well with the traditional outsourcing model for that elasticity that I talked about. We combine gig with the traditional outsourcing model. Some clients can also bolt on to that some EOR staff so that they have some boots on the ground in the location that are reporting directly to them. So we're very flexible in terms of sourcing models. And then, of course, we have our advisory practice that can assist clients in starting to inject AI into projects next to these three human delivery models.
Interesting. Yeah. Look, I find the gig work, for a while there, it was sort of kind of pegged to be the future of work. Everything would become gig. And I think that hasn't really worked out, and I think like full-time dedicated staff seems to be the best worst option out there, and it's proven to be so historically over the last few hundred years at least. And I am fascinated by the gig workforce though, and different platforms that encourage it. And yeah, I find it really, really interesting. It's good that you have a working model. And do are you sort of market maker in that, how do you manage both sides of the market in terms of if there's not enough client demand, then you're going to struggle to get the workers listing and enrolling and keeping their profiles fresh. And then how do you get enough good quality gig workers on the platform that are up for doing the job that they advertise? Do you do a lot of sort of management of the marketplace directly?
It's a fine art. Let me call it. Let me call it that. Indeed, no businesses or no work on the platform, you won't attract any gig workers, or the gig workers you attract will disconnect because they don't see anything interesting on the platform, and vice versa. The businesses will not come if they don't see the right talent. So it's a catch-22 situation. We have a decent size of gig workers on the platform already with a diverse skill set. And what we also do now for the clients on the platform or new clients coming on board, we launch very specific recruitment campaigns, recruitment being, a gig worker recruitment, not traditional employee recruitment, in the target markets or in the target demographics for specific clients, so that we have like a very fast growth in gig capacity and the specific skill sets for the client needs that are using the platform. So it is indeed something that is a little bit of a dance between supply and demand, but that's the way we typically orchestrate that. And every new business that comes on board, getting more projects into the platform means that you will have a more loyal base, and also, let's say, pre-trained in certain disciplines base of gig workers, which then attracts businesses. So you have kind of a hockey stick effect taking place over time on how that platform grows. Let's say priming the pump, to use that expression, is a little bit of a fine art, especially in the early stages of such a platform.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. But well done. These platforms can sort of pay off after a little bit of incubation. So it's really interesting
Yep.
exercise. So let's move on to the topic du jour then. AI. Everyone's talking about that, especially. Well, most industries are impacted by AI, not least the call center industry. Can we go back to the beginning? Like, fundamentally, I know what AI is, but what do you see? What is AI when it comes to business processes, when it comes to implementation into businesses? Just start with that as a sort of broad introduction, and we can go from there, I suppose.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah. What isn't it would
Yeah, exactly.
be maybe a better question these days. Just a little bit on a side anecdote. I used to also see what was coming toward us since the ChatGPT moment, that this is going to massively over time influence white collar work. But then when I see where robots are already today, then I'm also starting to think that it's not just white collar, it's blue collar, it's across the board, it's the services industry, it's everything is going to be affected. Now, where are we in this today? And that's a personal opinion, of course. I think we're in the middle of hyperbolism. There's a huge potential. I mean, I'm absolutely on board with the potential of AI, and I think this is a force to stay, and it's going to have an impact and continue to have an impact on an industry like the BPO industry. What we hear from our clients is everybody is very curious about, okay, so what about AI? What do you do in this space? What's your approach? What technologies? What should we do? And so on. So clients are considering literacy and demonstrated ability to deploy AI as an absolutely critical selection criterion when they choose a partner. So it's like, specifically relating to Europe, are you GDPR compliant? If you're not, you're off the list. Are you ISO 27001? If not, you're off the list. AI is in that same category. If you're not able to demonstrate real world deployments of AI and advisory capability in AI, you're basically going to be dismissed by most clients, even though those clients will not want to immediately start using AI in their processes. But it's a must have. So that's a first given. What we then also see with a lot of clients, and even the clients that come to us and are hyper enthusiastic about AI, what we typically see is, and also recommend is, listen, you're a new client. We need to get to know each other. We need to get to know and understand your processes, the specificity of your business, your tools, your industry, your type of clientele, what channels they prefer to use specifically in CX then, and so on. So there's a whole mutual discovery phase that we need to go through together before we can even start to touch AI. And then we have to ask ourselves, like, what's basic elements? What's your knowledge management process? Have you at all done a well-structured and set up a well-structured knowledge management capability within your organization? If not, that's priority number one. Garbage in, garbage out. You can have the best large language model if you don't have the correct knowledge that you can feed into it and guardrail around that. You're looking for trouble. It's not going to deliver what it's to its full potential. So our recommendation to clients, even the ones that are hyper enthusiastic about AI and want to start as soon as possible, is typically make sure you understand exactly how things are working and make sure your partner understands exactly how things are working. And then once you have stabilized a transition over to an outsourcing vendor, then start looking for that first opportunity. Yeah. And the precursor to actually releasing AI to the broad public is do reinforcement learning by working on a platform that has suggested answers. Suggested answers meaning you have a chat session, AI is going to monitor that chat session, is going to recommend to the human agent, hey, this is the solution to this problem. The human agent eyeballs that and then decides, yep, that's correct, or that is absolutely incorrect, and then basically also feeds that back into the system and saying this was the right answer and it solved the client situation or the customer situation, or this was a wrong answer. So that's a feedback loop, and you can have that feedback loop on live chat, you can have it on email conversations, and you can have it on real-time voice conversations where you do speech to text, and the AI does exactly the same thing. It listens to the conversation and suggests to the agent this is probably the answer to this specific situation. So what you get if you approach it like this, if you have this intermediate phase, is one, you're testing your knowledge base and you're testing the capacity of the LLM to really, within very strictly defined boundaries, limit itself to that knowledge base and to really understand intent of what the question is and then offer the right answer. And then you have this scoring when a human agent says, this was the correct answer. That reinforces the LLM to understand, okay, for this question, this is a correct answer. And you basically cycle through this with positive and negative reinforcement until you have an AI model that is competent in a certain types of questions coming in. So that's kind of all precursory work that you need to do before you can even open the floodgates to the general public. That's my personal opinion, and that's also how we talk to clients about it. And then what you can do is you can say, okay, let's choose a first channel. Low-hanging fruit typically is going to be chat or email. And then let's start maybe choosing by going just with one language in one geography, maybe one of your smaller geographies where the volumes are a little bit lower. And let's maybe limit it to certain use cases so that the AI recognize this is a type of a question I can handle, and this is something that I need to hand over to a human. So that's kind of the first dipping the toe in the water, and then you start measuring, monitoring. You have a data science team behind that we also host for and operate for our clients, that really carefully and obsessively monitors what's going on and reinforcement learning happening there again. And when you got that bolted down, you open it to more cases, or you open it to more languages, more geographies, other channels, and so on and so on. And in this way, we've assisted clients to open up new markets at very low cost points. We've assisted clients in automating the more repetitive, easy, low-hanging fruits for reducing, obviously, cost, but also allowing the existing teams to specialize on the more complex cases. It
And
is
so you're
just like
focusing mainly on sort of CX purposes, or, are you going deep into an organization and maybe I don't know,
Yeah,
rethinking their
and that's
strategy kind of thing, like management
absolutely,
consultancy.
and yeah, it's a spot on question, Derek. That's kind of the next stage after that, because knowledge base and being able to handle questions based on a knowledge base is really scratching the surface. It can affect positively in terms of volume. With AI, you have 24/7, you have elastic capacity, all the same advantages that we kind of talked about a little bit with gig workforce. But then you're able to handle, depending on the client, you're only going to be able to handle those questions that are, let's say, cookie cutter type situations that are based on a knowledge base. Then comes the really exciting part, which is fine. You have certain processes and procedures. Let's now start looking with this capability how you can maybe start re engineering how you handle cases, reprioritizing, maybe working with VIP clients that have a different exposure, and so on and so on. So that's one element. And then the second element is then you really go into back office systems and you have agentic AI pulling data from logistics platforms, from finance platforms, from warranty handling platforms, from ERP systems, and basically also giving those AI agents access to those types of data sources so that they can handle more complex queries and also action more complex queries. Like, okay, your guarantee case is accepted. We will ship you a UPS package to send the defect product back, and then we will also in parallel send you a new product to replace the defect product. Those things then really start handling all those more complex tasks also. But the hyperbolism has created such a level of enthusiasm that people think that this is something you can achieve in a matter of weeks. You need to be pragmatic. You need to be, realistic, and you need to give the whole process time to actually go step by step until you reach that level of automation and deeper integration into back office systems. So
It's
yeah, it's a
incremental steps, isn't
fascinating
it?
domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating domain, and it clearly is something that is here to stay and that will have a growing impact. And I think
I,
honestly that outsourcing firms have a bright future in this if they are smart at how they absorb and play it and really convert themselves into data companies and solutions integration companies over time. That we're talking 5 to 10 years now, but that's the general direction. This is where things are going.
and I suppose, if we remove Conectys from the picture, just so that we can speak more, I suppose, philosophically and in principle, is there a tension between the existing model and the new disrupting model of AI? I'd be interested to know how one charges for those services, because obviously a call center model is fairly, standard in terms of bumps on seats, in terms of pricing, more so than a deliverable or output based pricing. It's a little bit more sort of accurate and reliable. You can certainly charge for output and deliverables based on the existing performance, but how defensible is that? As soon as the AI and the systems have been built, then essentially the marginal cost is pennies to get these jobs done. And so is the margin that you command really defensible over many months? And then would that margin be eaten away by the industry disruptors? We know that there's a lot of disruptors coming into the industry, and typically the incumbents find it harder to evolve, and maybe even clients wouldn't necessarily come to the incumbents for their AI solutions because they kind of feel like, hey, you guys are the staffing guys. We'll go and talk to the AI guys for the AI solutions. How do you see all of this, I suppose, more broadly, more philosophically, working out for the call center industry? And can it be agile and nimble enough to make these vast changes?
You've touched on a lot of points here that we also are seeing. I mean, yes, of course, some clients are going to go directly to the tech companies and say, hey, for example, I've outsourced. I have X hundred people sitting there, but I want to optimize that. And they work directly with tech companies. And that's perfectly fine. That makes sense. But those tech companies will not have the years of experience, specifically in this example in CX. They will not know your processes. They will not know your clients. They will not know the voice of the client, and so on and so on. So I think that is why there is not a single client that we are talking to today that is not considering a strong demonstrated capability in injecting AI into client processes as a must have, because you're in this together with your clients. You're running a very specific, unique account and project, and there's a lot of knowledge transfer that took place over time in both directions. So that basis of really understanding very deeply through a long client relationship the realities of what is possible with AI, what is not, and how to approach it. That's one differentiator that I think that the BPO industry has. We're domain experts in running CX. The second element is, I think what we see a lot of, excuse the expression, but lipstick on a bulldog. We see a lot of BPO players completely turning around and saying that they're not even on their marketing material on their website. They're not even positioning themselves as a company that employs hundreds of thousands of employees and runs business processes with humans. They're completely doing a 180 towards we are an AI deployment firm. Yeah, I mean, we strongly believe that the blend of human and AI is the way to go. And we strongly believe that this needs to be done in a controlled, well paced, well thought through, safe manner. So we see this, knee jerk reaction from some of the really big players out there. And then with regards to what do you do as an outsourcing firm, aren't you killing your own traditional business model? I think that's the nature of evolution. Look at Microsoft under Steve Ballmer, didn't want to let go of selling licenses on a CD in the age when software as a service and cloud was clearly the direction. And then you have Satya Nadella coming on board and turning everything around in that direction. And okay, it's now one of the most highly valued companies in the world, where they absolutely were not back in the days when they stuck to their old model stubbornly. With all due respect for Steve Ballmer and Satya Nadella, I think we're in a similar moment. You're just going to have to enthusiastically jump on this bandwagon, or your lunch is going to be eaten. It's that simple. And then to touch on the last element that you've mentioned, of course, the whole commercial model is shifting. It is clearly going into the direction of outcome-based pricing. We will invoice you per resolved case. AI companies are doing this. They only invoice per case that was resolved by their AI technology. I think the outsourcing firms are clearly moving in the same direction. And then basically the positioning towards a client is it doesn't matter whether this case was handled by human or AI or a combination of human and AI. It's the outcome, the result, that we resolve the case with a CSAT that is on or above your CSAT target, and that triggers a payment event. So we're clearly moving in that direction also. What needs to be blended in that, however, is if you are, I don't know if this is a good example, but let's use it anyway. If you're a sugar beverage company, without naming specific companies, it's the old story. Your core business is selling beverages. Having a partner that understands the full end-to-end spectrum of what CX is and the complexity of multilingual and global and workforce management and all that good stuff. Also, as a partner to help you towards injecting AI and the efficiencies of AI into your processes is going to shift from, okay, I need people who really understand CX to I need people 5 or 10 years down the road who really are absolutely stars at data science and helping us with collecting that knowledge and helping us with keeping the LLMs on their toes and helping us with the safety dimension of this and having the ISO certifications for safe AI in the EU and. So that core competency set is most definitely shifting over to data science away from just people-based delivery models.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's certainly the future direction is very clear, just how we kind of navigate toward it is quite unclear, and it's becoming quite competitive in the space now. Most of the time, call centers have been considered old industry. They're getting low valuations and not a lot of interest. And now there's a lot of technology flooding into the space, and certainly it's seen as kind of a hotbed of innovation, from some incumbents, but also from some potential disruptors. So it's really fascinating space at the moment, and one to be watched.
Yeah, I think in the evolution, I think you can compare this to the meteor impact moment for dinosaurs. Dinosaurs survived if they were small and nimble and fast. We have dinosaurs around us today. They're called birds, and they are the ones that survived because they're small and nimble and fast. So it's really going to come down to that, I think. The difference here, it's fortunately it's not a meteor moment, but it's a little bit more of a gradual transition taking place. The impact is taking place over years instead of in a flash of a moment. But it's comparable to something like that. And
I suppose the uncertainty is the end point. If this AI becomes so intelligent that in order to manage customer success or CX or customer outcomes, you just literally connect it to X tool and press go, and it's all done, and it trains itself and it integrates itself into whatever systems, then it's sort of difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to eke out a margin on that, because it's going to sort of go to zero in terms of the marginal cost of deployment. It's going to be fascinating to see. I mean, that's going to wipe out incredible number of jobs. And will it get to a point where it asymptotes, where you need supervisors, you need managers still, you need people tweaking it and things like that? Or will it just be able to comprehend the job in front of it and manage customer satisfaction and success? It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we're early stage in the life cycle of AI. It's definitely moving at breakneck speed, and it's becoming more and more impressive in terms of capabilities. And it's going to be an interesting ride. But specifically for our industry, I firmly believe that it's obviously it's here to stay. It's going to have a massive impact. It has huge potential for value driving for our clients, and also driving value for our employees, moving up the value chain in terms of not handling the more repetitive tasks with the edge cases, which are much more interesting, and also moving in the direction of becoming the guardians of knowledge and steering an organization more from a process and technology perspective, or a part of an organization, instead of doing, let's say, more entry-level repetitive work. There's a lot of growth opportunity in this also, but it's probably not going to be for everyone. That's clear.
Yeah, exactly. And Arnold, I suppose in summary, are you optimistic for the future? Are you full steam ahead? There's a lot of talk. There's a lot of sort of negative narrative around the space, but everyone I speak to is very optimistic. They're seeing great growth. They're seeing great margins. How are you placed?
I've often been called a fanatic optimist. I'm also optimistic, and personally, I absolutely adore change. I adore the challenge of change, and I'm really enjoying seeing developing a strategy to having developed a strategy to really be a strong player in this new world, and continuing to implement and to deploy that. And it's so rewarding to see the results of that materialize. It's so rewarding to hear the feedback from clients who are impressed with what we do with technology, who love the gig capability that we can bolt on top of their requirements, the flexibility that we show. So I'm absolutely having fun, and very excited about prospects of what is coming in the coming years.
Well, what an incredible journey. Arnold, thank you so much. Thanks for the insights, and what a journey for Conectys. Congratulations. Arnold, as always, I encourage people to have a look, check you out, or get in touch. How can they do that?
Well, obviously, you can get in touch on our website, conectys.com. You can check out kaboo.ai. I'm on LinkedIn, Arnold Cobbaert. Any means to contact is fine. You can also, my email is arnold.cobbaert@conectys.com. So, we can put all that in the meeting notes. Happy to entertain further conversations on all these interesting topics.
Sure. Sounds great. Arnold, thank you so much.
Thank you also, Derek. Have a great rest of the day in Dubai.
That was Arnold Cobbaert. He is the founder and CEO of Conectys. As always, if you want any of the show notes, go to outsourceaccelerator.com/podcast. And if you want to ask us anything, just drop us an email to ask@outsourceaccelerator.com. See you next time.